2024 Iowa State Fair, and we are talking right now with Iowa 3rd District Congressman Zach Nunn. Thanks so much for taking the time to stop by today.
Guys, I think we got the best possible day of the kickoff for the fair. It is wonderful weather down here. We've been all around with our kids this morning. We're dancing. We got some good food. We were up at the top, and now we're just making our way slowly, as we talked earlier, down towards the beer tin in the day off. Not bad.
Got to relax somewhere, right? So lots of things, obviously, to talk about top of mind. You know, obviously, you got the August recess going on right now.
That's right.
A lot of farmers are talking about what didn't get done more than what did get done this year. And, of course, Farm Bill is top of mind. We just had the NCBA president joining us a few minutes ago. He was talking about that as well. I mean, we've talked about why it needs to be done, how soon it needs to be done. What's the story where we're at?
Well, candidly, I wanted it to be done last fall when it was supposed to be done. I'm 18 months on this job, and one of the things that we made a priority being on the Ag Committee and just being from Iowa is making sure that we have top priorities in there. That's why I'm glad Iowa outkicked its coverage. I got to lead 17 bills that were included in the Farm Bill. The bipartisan version of the House bill got through all the way back in May, so we've been able to show both sides can work on this. We can support SNAP, but we can also do things that I think are really important for Iowa. Protect our commodity prices, our insurance. We moved a large bill forward to help young and beginning farmers get the access they need to credit. I led specifically a bill called Goldie's Act to help shut down, bad puppy mills that are hurting animals and work with our local law enforcement. We also have more responsibility in there for USDA to do its job and actually talk to Iowans, find out what they need and make sure those things are processed. A big aspect of this is getting hard dollar infrastructures invested, whether that's for rural farm to market roads or high-speed broadband for rural communities. You know this, as we go out farming, you talk with farmers now, precision ag is going to be where it's at. The role of artificial intelligence in this all needs to be brought in. I've championed Iowa State University as a huge part. So we've gotten our job done in the House. Now I'm asking the Senate do its job, either look at our bill, which I think is pretty darn good and has bipartisan support, or at least put something down on paper that we can have a conversation about. Right now, challengingly, the Senate has continued to do no action on this, and I'm cautiously optimistic we'll move forward for what's going to happen during the lame duck session. Maybe some of these senators end up losing their job and actually have a conversation with us about moving a farm bill forward.
You know, and when I was out in D.C. in April was the day Senator Stabenow released her version of what she wanted the farm bill to look like. Now, obviously, we know that there's historically differences between the House and Senate version. But what is it about? Usually, we always knew that it was going to come together.
Yeah.
The four corners would come together, they would sit down, they'd hash it out, and then they'd have something to go. Where has that gotten lost?
Yeah, it's gotten lost first and foremost, and we need an actual farm in this year's Farm Bill. And I am concerned that this is a once in a 5-year opportunity, not only to support the things what Senator Stabenow wants. I think she wants SNAP, but she wants SNAP Plus. I mean, right now, SNAP takes up about 80% of the overall Farm Bill. We're talking about a $1.5 trillion Farm Bill. So a lot of money going to support SNAP, which is absolutely important, but it shouldn't be at a point where that's all we're going to talk about. There are family farmers across the country that need the support right now. We've got 87,000 of those family farmers right here, and that's where I think the House has held the line, been able to bring bipartisan support in and say, let's actually get a Farm Bill that helps, the producer, the grower, the manufacturer, the consumer, and ultimately the family here. I've got 6 kids, and it is expensive to feed them right now. It's something that obviously we're going to do, but when Iowa, the #1 producer of eggs, sees egg prices go up 40% over the past 3 years, we've got a real problem in the ag market. I looked at the price per bushel for corn right now. We're down to just under $4. That is not sustainable for a family farm. So being able to move forward something that really supports our growers, our producers, is going to be essential in any farm bill. I want the Senate to take that to heart, to recognize the importance of it. The House is there, and this is why I say, if Senator Stabenow no longer is chairwoman after November, she may think about her legacy of saying, I want to help family farms and families across the country and come back to the negotiating table.
And when we talk about the fact that it costs so much to feed a family, obviously we need those programs, like you said, of SNAP and these things. How do we find that balance between helping these people in a time when the cost of eating and feeding your family is going higher, but also the same token, making sure we're fiscally responsible for making sure that this isn't a burden on the taxpayers beyond what we need.
That's absolutely right. So this is why we do a farm bill for once in every 5 years, so we can have some strategy in this long-term plan and not just blast money out, because ultimately that's your and my tax dollars that are going to be spent in Washington, D.C. I want to make sure that every kid has food on the plate. But in order for that to be successful, we've also got to make sure that farmers are able to actually produce the food they need. Food doesn't just show up at a Walmart or at a school lunch cafeteria. it's got to be grown by somebody probably out here at the fair today that's put the long-term work in. Look, we're a 6th-generation farm family. I recognize fully whether it's row crop or whether it's something being laid in a hen house or something that's being grazed in a field, we need to make sure that we have real solutions here. It's another reason that I push back so hard on pouring millions of dollars into expeditionary things like lab-grown meats, things that are costing all taxpayers more, but have returned very little results, and clearly are undermining a marketplace, which has been good for cattlemen and hog farmers across the area. So we've done and identified things in the Farm Bill that are going to save taxpayers money, so long as we actually get it across the finish line. I feel very good about both feeding America, but then also helping the growers who are actually providing the food for America.
Of course, now, the Farm Bill is not the only thing agricultural related that you're watching. And of course, trying to go and get that second term now. I mean, what kind of things are you campaigning on to think about? That things that are going to concern you now the next 2 years outside of a Farm Bill?
Yeah, well, I think definitely an American first agenda is important for this. What we have seen before is that we want to make sure that our soybean producers, our corn growers, our cattlemen and our hogs are able to be exported to foreign markets in a fair way, where they're not actually making it harder for Americans to be able to sell our products overseas. The other aspect of this is we've got a lot of good conservation programs being led by farmers. I want the USDA and EPA to come out here and see how we do this in Iowa, because this is the next generation of good farm families. They're doing it the right way. I go out to all 21 counties and I have farm listening tours in every single county. One of the biggest things I hear about is the average age of family farmers, 67 years old. God bless, we don't ask any other generation of America to have to do that. The other aspect of this is we also want to make sure that the next generation of farm families have an on-ramp to this. So whether it's a young farmer, it's a generational farmer, it's a military veteran, they have the opportunity to come out and take over that farm. We're soon going to be at a spot where the average farm family is going to have a head of household who's 73. That is a lot to ask of anybody to continue to farm and feed the world. We can do that right here in America with a strategy of new and beginning farmers having a good on-ramp to be able to do that.
Another thing I know we talk about a lot right now is sustainable aviation fuel, the rules that are involved with it, also the tax credits that will come with conservation practices, which we're waiting for 45Z rulings to come out, but also the fact that the fuels that are becoming part of this are ethanol imports from Brazil, are talking used cooking grease from China and other places. Where do we go? And great that we can use some of that stuff to be sustainable and reuse it so it's not being wasted. But at the same token, how do we get our seat at the table? Because we're producing it right here. What do we have to do also to get that infrastructure up so we're capturing the carbon like we're supposed to so we can qualify for these programs? How do we do it? Because it's more than just what's happening in the field.
Well, and you got to look at what's happening around the world right now. One of my biggest frustrations is it's cheaper for a renewable fuels plant in Georgia to buy corn from Brazil than it is to be able to buy corn product here in Iowa and ship it over. We have reverse incentives. We've made it easier for a country like Brazil to claim a carbon capture or green credit for this than we have for our own farmers who are doing this the right way. So part of it's just rolling back the regulation in Washington, giving it back to the true guarantee and conservators of the land, our family farms and producers. We see things can happen much better in that aspect. The other part I want to do is I want to continue to work across the aisle here. It's not just Iowa farmers, it's pork producers in North Carolina. We have similar goals, and we're seeing this on both Democrat and Republican areas. Nikki Baczynski, my friend from Illinois, she has the #1 soybean producing district in the country. We're right up there with her, being from Iowa, but she's a Democrat. We are mutually aligned in success for this. So there's good bipartisan solutions out there. I guess the big aspect I see coming up here is what we can do collectively to make sure that the USDA and those folks in Washington are really hearing from districts as diverse as North Carolina, Illinois, Iowa, California, Florida, and really using their best practices as a model rather than trying to gin up something that they hear largely on a political basis or largely because they think that they can do it to force U.S. farmers to have to compete with a foreign competitor who's doing this at a cheaper, worse, more economically and environmentally, frankly, disastrous policy than what we could do right here in the U.S.
Well, obviously, the ag committee's usually the most bipartisan, even with what we see right now and how things can be in D.C. How do we get that to stretch beyond those committees? Obviously, we got to get right to the table to negotiate, but the ag communities only make up what 10% of what the whole Congress. So how do we get that voice out to let these people know that this is important, that it's not just the food in the farm bill, or it's not just the renewable resources that are in a sustainable aviation fuel. We've got to make it good for everybody. And how do you get that across to someone who lives in the coastal areas that doesn't understand it?
Well, hey, look, I think first and foremost, we need to see food security is really America's national security. I've done 20 years with the U.S. Air Force on multiple combat tours. One's overseas, helping other people with their energy independence, but we are growing the food that's sustaining this country, as well as fueling this country's future. We got to make sure that folks, even if you don't have an ag background, recognize how important a place like Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, Kansas, all these places are to agriculture. And it goes beyond there. I mean, the #1 ag producing state is California. California should have a much bigger buy-in to this being successful. So here's a couple of things I'm recommending. One, these are bipartisan. We're able to get folks on both sides of the aisle to come together on it. We also need folks in the Senate to recognize this isn't something you can simply kick down the road year after year. We're going to get to a real pinch here. We've had horrible storms here in Iowa. I've been out trying to help our farmers get back on their feet, but we need to make sure the rest of the country realizes that if we can't produce something here domestically, we're going to be very dependent on a foreign power providing that. Whether that's fertilizer coming from Eastern Europe, whether it's oil coming from the Middle East, whether it's food that we have to buy, again, from a place like Brazil, when we have the ability to produce it here domestically. And when you lose a generation of farm families, now all of a sudden you've really hollowed out what makes America autonomously secure. And so we got to make sure that we're prioritizing that as much as we do our national defense, as much as we do our spending drawdown and our tax cuts, is we've got to be able to take care of locally grown energy, locally grown food, and that means anything that happens here in the domestic border. It's one of the reasons that I stood up to even Republican leadership when they tried to cut promised agreements on things like biofuel and tax credits that were going to go to sustainable aviation fuel and our other areas. It was the Iowa delegation who led the charge, and it was the Iowa delegation that frankly won and made sure Congress was being attentive to the fact that while we may be a small portion of the population, we have an outsized role in the entire world economy.
All right, well, Congressman Nunn, you got a lot to do here at this fair, and we're holding you up from the relaxation time, so we thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us.
Get that pork chop.